Welcome back. Today we'll be reading from chapter 6 in Joseph Campbell's Primitive Mythology book. We're on section 2 in chapter 6. This chapter is entitled Shamanism, and section 2 is entitled Shamanistic Magic. From Wankan Tanka, the great mystery comes all power. From Wankan Tanka, the great mystery comes all power, said an old chieftain of the Oglala Sioux chief Peace of Flatiron to Natalie Curtis when she was collecting material for the Indians book in the first decade of the present century. That will be the last century, 20th. It is all from Wankan Tanka that the holy man has wisdom and the power to heal and to make holy charms. Man knows that all healing plants are given by Wankan Tanka. Therefore they are holy. So too is the buffalo holy because it is the gift for their food, their clothing, and their welfare. And to man he gave also the knowledge how to use these gifts, how to find the holy healing plants, how to hunt and surround the buffalo, how to know wisdom, for all comes from Wankan Tanka. All. To the holy man comes in youth the knowledge that he will be holy. The great mystery makes him know this. Sometimes it is the spirits who tell him. The spirits come not in sleep always, but also when man is awake. When a spirit comes, it would seem as though a man stood there, but when this man has spoken and goes forth again, none may see whither he goes. Thus the spirits, with the spirits the holy man may commune always, and may teach him holy things. The holy man goes apart to a lone tepee, and fasts and prays. Or he goes into the hills in solitude. When he returns to men, he teaches them and tells them what the great mystery has bidden him to tell. He counsels, he heals, and he makes holy charms to protect the people from all evil. Great is his power, and greatly is he revered. His place in the tepee is an honored one. Knud Rasmussen received from the Caribou Eskimo shaman Igjugarjuk a full account of the ordeal through which he had acquired his shamanistic power. When young, he had been visited constantly by dreams that he could not understand. Strange unknown beings came and spoke to him, and when he awoke he saw all the visions of his dreams so distinctly that he could tell his fellows all about them. Soon it became evident to all that he was destined to become an Angakok, a shaman, and an old man named Purkanoak was appointed his instructor. In the depth of winter, when the cold was most severe, Igjugarjuk was placed on a small sledge just large enough for him to sit on, and carried far away from his home to the other side of Hikoligjuag. On reaching the appointed spot, he remained seated on the sledge while his instructor built a tiny snow hut, with barely room for him to sit cross-legged. He was not allowed to set foot on the snow, but was lifted from the sledge and carried into the hut, where a piece of skin just large enough for him to sit on served as a carpet. No food or drink was given him. He was exhorted to think only of the Great Spirit, and of the helping spirit that should presently appear. And so he was left to himself and his meditations. After 5 days had elapsed, the instructor brought him a drink of lukewarm water, and with similar exhortations left him as before. He fasted now for 15 days, and when he was given another drink of water and a very small piece of meat which had to last him, he fasted now for 15 days, when he was given another drink of water and a very small piece of meat which had to last him a further 10 days. At the end of this period, his instructor came for him and fetched him home. Icjugurjuk declared that the strain of those 30 days of cold and fasting was so severe that he sometimes died a little. During all that time he thought of only the Great Spirit and endeavored to keep his mind free from all memory of human beings and everyday things. Toward the end of the 30 days there came to him a helping spirit in the shape of a woman. She came while he was asleep and seemed to hover in the air above him. After that he dreamed no more of her, but she became his helping spirit. For 5 months following this period of trial, he kept on the strictest diet and required to abstain from all intercourse with women. The fasting was then repeated, for such fasts at frequent intervals are the best means of attaining to knowledge of hidden things. As matter of fact, there is no limit to the period of study. It depends on how much one is willing to suffer and anxious to learn. Women too became shamans. In the same Eskimo community was Kinalik, still a young woman, as Dr. Rasmussen describes her. Very intelligent, kind-hearted, clean and good-looking, who spoke frankly and without reserve. Icjugurjuk was her brother-in-law and had himself been her instructor in magic. Her initiation had been severe. She was hung up to some tent poles planted in the snow and left there for 5 days. It was midwinter, with intense cold and frequent blizzards, but she did not feel the cold, for the spirit protected her. When the 5 days were at an end, she was taken down and carried into the house, and Icjugurjuk was invited to shoot her, in order that she might attain to intimacy with the supernatural visions of death. The gun was loaded with real powder, but a stone was used instead of the leaden bullet in order that she might still retain connection with earth. Icjugurjuk, in the presence of the assembled villagers, fired the shot, and Kinalik fell to the ground unconscious. On the following morning, just as Icjugurjuk was about to bring her to life again, she awakened from the swoon unaided. Icjugurjuk asserted that he had shot her through the heart, and that the stone had afterward been removed and was in the possession of her old mother. One gets the impression, however, that although these St. Anthonys of the wilderness must truly have suffered in their youthful years of austerity, they have a tendency to pull the long bow when telling of their trials, or perhaps rather to confuse dream reality with daytime events. We have already heard of the 10 deaths and resurrections of Rasmussen's other Eskimo shaman, Najagnek. In the same community with Icjugurjuk, there was still another practicing shaman, a young man whose name was Agjertok, who, as Dr. Rasmussen declares, without the hint of a smile, had also been initiated into the mysteries of the occult with Icjugurjuk as his teacher, and in this case a third form of ordeal had been employed, to wit that of drowning. He was lashed to a long pole and carried out onto a lake. A hole was cut in the ice, and the pole, with its living burden, thrust down through the hole in such a fashion that Agjertok actually stood on the bottom of the lake with his head under water. He was left in this position for 5 days, and when at last they hauled him up again, his clothes showed no sign of having been in the water at all, and he himself had become a great wizard, having overcome death. The Caribou Eskimos, dwelling in the cruel Arctic wastes west of the northern reaches of the Hudson Bay, are among the most primitive people on Earth, and their counterparts at the other extreme of the New World, on the no less bleak and difficult rocky tip of the southern continent, Tierra del Fuego, are likewise specimens of a type of life that was already out of fashion in the later millenniums of the Paleolithic, 30,000 to 10,000 BC. It is not known when the people now inhabiting the southern tip of South America, that uttermost part of the earth, first arrived in their rocky refuge, pressed down by the later, more highly developed societies of the north. But their ancestors must have crossed into the New World from Siberia many millenniums ago. When first explored by Europeans, the area was found divided among 4 tribes. The Yagans, or Yamanas, of the southern coasts, a short and sturdy people who lived largely on fish and limpets, handled canoes with skill, and could occasionally manage to harpoon a seal, porpoise, or even diminutive whale. A considerably taller and comparatively handsome mountain-dwelling people, known as the Ona, in the inland area of the Yagans, who lived by the hunt, and to the west and the east of these, respectively, Alakaluf and the Aush. The former, like the Yagans, a canoe people, and the latter, like the Ona, to whom they were related, a race of hunters. In the year 1870, a mission was established at the site since known as Ushuaia by a courageous young clergyman, Thomas Bridges, whose son Lucas, born at Ushuaia in 1874, has given an account of his long life among his friends, the Yagans and the Ona. Some of these humbugs, he says, describing the medicine men, or June of the Ona, were excellent actors, standing or kneeling beside the patient, gazing gently at the spot where the pain was situated. The doctor would allow a look of horror to come over his face. Evidently he could see something invisible to the rest of us. His approach might be slow, or he might pounce, as though afraid that the evil thing that had caused the trouble would escape. With his hands he would try to gather the malign presence into one part of the patient's body, generally the chest, where he would then apply his mouth and suck violently. Sometimes this struggle went on for an hour, to be repeated later. At other times the June would draw away from his patient with the pretense of holding something in his mouth with his hands. Then, always facing away from the encampment, he would take his fingers from his mouth, gripping them tightly together, and with a guttural shout difficult to describe and impossible to spell, fling this invisible object to the ground and stamp fiercely upon it. Occasionally a little mud, some flint, or even a tiny, very young mouse might be produced as the cause of the patient's indisposition. I myself have never seen a mouse figure in one of these performances, but they were quite common. Perhaps when I was there the doctor had failed to find a mouse's nest. Well, we'll stop there for now. Next time we'll continue with section 2 in the chapter on shamanism. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for joining me.